A few weeks ago, I was up in school, and one of the things at our school that we do is they take us on a field trip, and which seemed like something you did in elementary school, but I guess whenever you get in big people school, you do those as well. Well, the field trips that they like to do is they take you to a type of ministry that you might not be used to doing. And this past semester, the ministry they took us to was a prison ministry. And so they took us to the White County Prison, and they brought us into the prison. And the chaplain tells us prison ministry isn't for everyone. He says, just wait till you hear this. And the guard just lets the door slam shut. All right? And when that happens, it's a distinct sound. You've probably heard it on TV. Some of you have heard it in real life. That's okay. You're here today. But there's something about you that feels like it's over. It's final. Well, I was okay because I've watched a lot of prison shows on TV, and you've got a lot of guards that are sitting there and protecting you while you're in the prison. Except, it didn't look like it looked on TV. We had Lieutenant Smith, who was in charge of all these little guards, but these guards couldn't have been older than 18, 19 years old. They weren't big, strong 18, 19-year-olds. They're guys and they're girls, and when I looked around, these Doctor of Ministry students that I see up here, that you see, were probably the toughest people that looked like outside of the prisoners. And these guys don't look too tough. Well, it was lunchtime, and so the pods were opened, and I'm just a little nervous. What if something goes wrong here? You see, we've had these moments in our life when everything might have seemed over. Everything might have seemed done. I don't know why this is. Oops. Steve, click that real quick. Click just next slide. Thank you. So we've had these moments when the door slams shut on us. And maybe this moment is something you specifically have had in something real, like a prison. Or maybe it's in school for our students. Or maybe it's a relationship that you've been in. There's times in our life when everything seems like it's finished. And this is where we are in Matthew chapter 27. Steve. In Matthew 27, verse 57, it reads like this. As evening approached, there came a man who had himself become a disciple of Jesus. Going to Pilate, he asked for Jesus' body. And Pilate ordered that it be given to him. So Joseph took the body, wrapped it in clean linen cloth, and placed it in his own tomb that he had cut out of the rock. He rolled a big stone in front of the entrance of the tomb and went away. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were sitting opposite the tomb. I want you to think about this. At the end of Matthew 27, the scene looks like everything is over. It looks like everything is finished. Jesus, who they'd been following for the last 3 years, who they were waiting to usher in the kingdom of God, wait to throw out all the bad people, and it was going to be ruled by Jesus and his followers. They are looking at this like it is over. Everything's done. Everything's completed. And I want us to think about what that feels like in our life. Where everything in your life feels like it's over. It might have been that you were in that hospital room. I've been in that hospital room where it goes to finished. It might be in your relationship with God. That things just aren't what they once were. You once had a faith and it isn't quite what it once was. But look what it says in Matthew. Matthew chapter 28, verse 1. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went and looked at the tomb. When we think about this, it wasn't that they go to the tomb and they look and think that everything's going to be okay. Mary and the other Mary, they're out there, but they were looking for death. They want to be with Jesus. They want to honor Jesus, but they are not expecting a resurrection that morning. See, Christianity didn't start when people had it all figured out. It started when everything in their life seemed to be falling apart. Everything was going wrong. We know the end of the story, and we sometimes just put it in their minds that they knew the end of the story, but they didn't. Life was tough. They were struggling. They were stalled out. I told you a few weeks ago, or probably at the end of November, I'd been working on this 1982 Corvette that I have. I got it for a great price. It's pricey to keep it going. I thought I had everything fixed. I thought it was ready to go. I'd put more money than I cared to in that. And I was driving out of my neighborhood, and our neighborhood's kind of on this incline, and it goes right into a highway. And as I go into the highway, I push the gas, and it just stops. 55 miles an hour, cars are coming at me, or more, and I'm stuck in the middle of the road, stalled out. What I thought was going to be great, I'm going to drive this car, it looks nice, is stalled out, and it's dead, and it's over. And so it sat in my garage, and it looks pretty in the garage, but it was sitting. I could talk about, I got this great car, but it's just sitting in the garage. Sometimes we look at our church, and we talk about the church as if the church is alive, and maybe it's just sitting still. I've had so many meetings where I used to go on Wednesday night, and I would talk in an elders meeting, and we talked about a retreat that we had, and everything pretty much when we talk about our events, well, they went great. Everything was good. And a lot of times there is a lot of good. I didn't talk about all the struggles that we also had. And that's kind of how we might be in the church. We might not identify what stalled out, the struggles we might have. It's probably also true about our life. Some of us are like that old 1982 car, stalled out. And until we mention, until we tell ourselves, until we're honest about what has died and what stalled and what stopped, we're never going to see resurrection. And so today I want you to think about what's stopped in your life. Maybe you've stopped working on your relationship with a loved one, a marriage. Maybe it's your relationship with God and His church. Maybe it's different ministries that you've been in. I want us to be honest and say, okay, where have we allowed this part of our life to stall out? And let's not do anything about it right now. Let's just be honest. Let's acknowledge it, because you can't have resurrection until you acknowledge what's dead. Look what happens when the ladies get to the tomb. They're not seeking anything there. They're looking for a dead Jesus. But then in verse 2 it says, there was a violent earthquake, and an angel of the Lord came down from heaven, and going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning. His clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and became like dead men. Look what's happened. They were going to look for a Jesus that had died. They were going to a tomb, and they weren't expecting what God was doing. They were probably thinking, well, what has happened? But God does some of his greatest work when no one can even see it. You see, there was an earthquake, and a tomb rolled away, and the stone rolled away, but the stone did not roll away to let Jesus out. Jesus had already been resurrected from the dead. The stone rolled away so people could go in and see what God has been doing. I told you about that Corvette. I told you that it wasn't working. Well, this past couple of weeks, Dane was in town for spring break. And we have him up in school. He's working on mechanical engineering, and so I want to hopefully use some of that tuition for good. And so I said, well, go look at that car, see what's going on. And guess what he finds out? There were a lot of vacuum tubes in that car, and several of them weren't connected. When we put the engine all back together, we didn't connect all the tubes right. We didn't connect all the vacuums right, but he did it, and what happens? The car was running. Sometimes we don't realize that everything's there. Everything might not be in place. We might not see it. But God has control. The resurrection shows us what looked dead was never without power. God was already at work before anyone could see it. God was working, and sometimes in your life when you think everything's stalled out, don't think God is not there. Don't think God is not working. And look what he says in verse 5 and 6. The angel says to the women, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you're looking for Jesus who was crucified. He's not here. He is risen, just as he said. Now come and see the place where he laid." Look at what the angel tells him. He says, you're looking for a dead man. There's no dead people here. He is risen. He's alive. He says, look around. And sometimes just a little bit of information changes how our world is fully shaped. I remember back in school, my last semester, when I was at A&M, I was in a cognitive psychology class, and we had a visiting professor from Japan, and it was hard for us to understand his English. And the funny thing about cognitive psychology is he would tell us what's going on in our brain to keep him from being able to speak clear English to us, which was interesting, but it didn't really help on our tests. I was so nervous. This was my last class. If I didn't pass this class, I don't graduate. Mary has already moved up to Dallas. I was still in College Station, and I was going a little kooky. I had an eye twitch that was starting to happen because I thought, there's no way I'm passing this class. And I remember walking and seeing the grades posted outside of the classroom door. I looked for my student ID. And that's me, Lane Brown, B- on the exam. Now, I'd already passed. Everything had already been happened, but something in my life totally changed. Everything that I was worried about went away. All that I've been working on for several years is now fully accomplished. And I can go off and I can go work and I can have a job and I can move in and we can marry and I can live together again and it was going to be wonderful. But I just needed that bit of information. And this is what the angel shows them. This little information that Jesus is not there. Jesus is risen. And so what are you going to do about it? You see, God is moving in our life even when we don't see it. And if God's moving in our life, even if we don't see it, I want to challenge us to think about the things that we thought about earlier that are stalled out. If God's already moving in our life, and if God is alive, why are we allowing these things to remain dead? Why are we allowing these things to remain stopped? Why are we allowing these things to remain stalled out? Why is your life not living like a Christian should be living? And why is my life not living like there's a resurrected Lord? Why do we read this story sometimes as a story and not, this is what Christ has done for us? So I want us to go back and think, well, what have we slowed down on? What part of our Christian walk have we stopped doing? And how can we start that up again? Look what the angel says. In verse 7, it says, "Now go quickly. Tell the disciples, he is risen. Tell him he is risen from the dead and is going ahead of you to Galilee, and there you will see him. Now I have told you." Well, it wasn't that he showed them what the resurrection was. It wasn't that he explained everything to them, how this actually happened. It wasn't that he said, hey, let's talk about the theology of what that meant, that Jesus was raised from the dead. What did he say? He said, go and tell others that he's risen. Tell them I'm going to meet them in Galilee. He didn't say, okay, now go get Peter, Andrew, James, and John, bring them back here so they can tell everyone. No. He gave them a commission to go. And what this tells us is it's not just I'm giving it to the preacher to tell the preacher to go out to tell everyone. He's saying those that have seen and heard and seen that he is resurrected, they are called to go and tell this good news. And so look what happens. The women, they go off. And they're frightful. And they're joyful. But they're going to spread this news. I remember when I was in junior high, I was at a little retreat. And we were trying to build a campfire, and we didn't have any fuel. And one of my friends, he was kind of a sciencey kind of guy. He says, you know what burns really good? He says, tree sap. I said, all right, well, let's get a bucket of tree sap, and then we can use that as fuel the whole weekend. And so we go to get some tree sap off of the pine trees. But then he says, you know how you can get it to drip in the bucket faster is you put a bucket under it, and you light the tree sap on fire, and it will drop into the bucket. And we said, that's a great idea. And so the tree sap's dropping in the bucket, but I don't know if you know this, but trees burn. And we had it under control, but the park ranger didn't really care for it too much. Thankfully, our sponsor that week was a fireman. That didn't look too good for him. But this is what a resurrected Lord is like. If we believe in resurrection, if we believe Jesus is alive, it doesn't stay contained. It doesn't stay here in this church. It doesn't stay just within you. It goes out. We don't just sit and talk about what it's like to have a resurrected Lord. We tell others what it's like. And look at what Jesus says. Go to two down. In verse 8. He says, so the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. Greetings, he says. And they came to him and clasped his feet and worshiped him. Then Jesus says to them, do not be afraid. Go tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. Let's go back one. Look at what Jesus says. The women are running off. They're going to tell the good news. They actually now see the risen Lord. And the women, they've done nothing wrong. They probably didn't know that Jesus was going to be raised, even though he told them, and so that's one thing. But all the guys abandoned Jesus. All the guys had left him. But look at what Jesus says. Go tell my brothers. You see, resurrection doesn't just prove Jesus is alive. It proves that failure is not final and disqualification is not permanent. And what Jesus says is, go tell my brothers, the same guys who abandoned me, the same guys who stalled out in their faith, the same guys that stopped believing at the most important moment of Jesus' life. He says, tell them to come and meet me. They still have a mission. Move on. See, Jesus doesn't just send finished people. He doesn't send people that just have it all together. He sends people that are restored. And that's what Christ does for us. Those of us that have lived our life apart from Him, He restores our life. So I want us to think about this. Go ahead. I want you to ask God who you need to move towards. Who is God telling you need to go out and reach out to? What is one step you need to take this week to live as if Jesus is risen? Jesus is calling us to go out to our brothers and sisters. He's telling us to go out and tell others the good news. If you look at verse 8 again, it says, so the women ran quickly from the tomb. They were frightened, but they were filled with joy. They rushed to give the disciples the angel's message. They couldn't contain what they'd seen. They couldn't contain what they'd felt. And I want us to think about this semester we've been talking about, what it's like to live and be formed in the flow of God's Spirit. And we've used this river metaphor. And I want us to think about the Big Head Creek that travels right behind us, goes all the way through town. You might have seen that creek. You might have gone down the walking trail. It's a nice little walking trail that goes across our city. But every now and again, that trail gets flooded out. That creek starts flooding across its banks. That's in 2016, that top picture, where it goes all the way across Dundee Road. It fills the whole golf course up with water because it overflows. We need to realize that this is the type of thing we need to do. If we want God to flow through us, if we want to be formed by the flow of His Spirit, sometimes we just need to let this news within us not be contained and flow out. Not that it stays in this church, but it goes out into our neighborhood, and it goes out into our city, goes out into our world. See, resurrection can't be contained. It doesn't stay contained. It moves through us. And next Sunday, I want us to think about how we can keep it not contained, but go out. We're going to go out, and we're going to have a neighborhood picnic outside. This is a perfect time to come back. It's a perfect time to invite our friends or invite our families to come out and enjoy God's grace. Every Sunday we hear a message. And on Easter Sunday, you're going to hear the same message. What God's done for us. And sometimes it's like when we go to a doctor's visit and you might hear some news. And we take news differently. Different people take news differently. Some of us hear the news that something's wrong with us and they just change their life fully. They say, okay, how can I deal with that? Some people hear it and they live their life the same. Jesus is risen. That's not up for debate. We believe that. But it's not just that He's risen, it's what are we going to do with this? The resurrection changes everything. And if Jesus is alive, we're called to move with Him. We're called to go with Him. And so today, I want you to think about what stalled out in your life and what can I change? How can I bring that back? How can I live like Jesus is alive? And some of you have never made that decision of I really need to step in to this faith. Some of you need to be baptized into Christ, have your sins washed away, and then go off and live like Him. It doesn't end in the baptistry. We're called to go and move. If we can help you in any way today, we're going to have some elders come out here, our leadership come off to the side. If you just need a prayer, we can pray for you. If you want to come forward, you can come forward. Whatever you need, please come while we stand and sing.